Imagine a station where you access information. Think of a station that creates awareness for national development. Imagine a station that prepares you for a bright and greater future. A station for all ages. Documentaries, classroom and television, events coverage, children's programs and variety shows. Always stay tuned to NTA Knowledge on the StarTimes platform, channel 359. For partnership, sponsorship and advert placements, contact us on NTA Knowledge. NTA Knowledge, learning to broaden horizon.
President Buhari sacks secretary to the government, Babachir Lawan, replaces him with boss Mustafa.
We need to strengthen the bilateral relationship between Cote d'Ivoire and Nigeria. This is what we discussed and committed ourselves to do so.
Nigeria and Cote d'Ivoire chart new course in bilateral relations to boost both countries' economies.
Performance of Operation Crocodile Smile has changed perception of military presence in the Niger Delta, says Governor Wike of Rivers State.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, our focus is on drug demand reduction.
Now, the dangerous and fast-growing trend of drug problem across the globe, and particularly Nigeria, which is our main concern, is the reason why we're once again discussing the issue for the second time within 1 week.
That's right, Rhoda. Now, the drug problem is a global plague, as it were, affecting both developed and developing countries. And, of course, there are also global efforts that have been on to combat both the physical as well as psychological matters arising from illicit drug use and trafficking.
Well, while there are many efforts geared towards addressing the issue, it is generally believed that supply suppression and demand reduction activities aimed at reducing the availability of illicit and controlled drugs through various interdiction and legal processes are top and more effective ways of combating this menace.
Well, supply suppression as well as demand reduction activities include knowledge, as it were, of the harms. The short-term interventions that have also been introduced include in-school programs as well as complex multi-social risk factors that have been identified and played up. In short, the activities consist of preventive, curative, and even punitive measures that will bring about a decline in the consumption of the illicit substances, as well as effective treatment, aftercare, rehabilitation, and social integration of drug-dependent persons.
Dr. Alex Wodak, in a working paper for the first meeting of the Global Commission on Drug Policy in 2011, said efforts to reduce the demand for illicit drugs through school-based and, of course, mass education campaigns have been generally disappointing, adding that the benefits have usually been small and transient, as the benefits reported from education have usually only been less positive attitudes to taking illicit drugs rather than any reduction in consumption, let alone a reduction in arms.
That's right, Rhoda. Now, Dr. Wodak also said that there was good evidence that reducing demand for illicit drugs through drug dependence treatment can be effective at the individual level and also at the community level.
Well, whatever the situation is, Kingsley, of course, it's not all aspects of drug problem that are addressed as just health issues. Some of them also are criminalized. Some of them are not to be criminalized, and that's why that's why having established the seriousness and of course the consciousness, you know, of the future of Nigeria, that was like a fortnight ago on this program, we find it pertinent to further discuss how this cankerworm of social evil has eaten deep into the fabric of our society, and of course is being addressed or supposed to be addressed. And that's what we're looking at this morning. Absolutely.
Well, of course, I wasn't around when the topic was first discussed. The issue has to do with substance abuse, or the abuse of psychotropic drugs, or narcotics, or otherwise. It's a global problem, but of course, Nigeria has to situate it in our own circumstance. And let's listen, exactly where are we in terms of dealing with the demand side? The supply side is also there to say, listen, you are arresting persons who are selling or otherwise supplying drugs. But what about those persons who are dependent on these illicit substances? How do you suppress demand for illicit drugs? That's why, again, as you said, we are assembling again this morning a team of guests from different locations in the country who will, of course, be addressing drug demand reduction. It doesn't have to do with your regular drugs that, of course, you have by way of prescription. We're not talking about illicit drugs, the kind of drugs that come very cheaply these days, we understand, from some parts of the world that we also don't. Now, but does Nigeria, as it were, have a policy on dealing with drug demand reduction? What are also the efforts aimed at curbing the issue of drug demand? Are there standard rehabilitation centers for victims? And who should families contact on drug-related issues? What are also the enlightenment efforts aimed at reducing drug use? Are there also pieces of legislation for dealing with drug demand reduction? And what role should families, communities, and indeed the government play in dealing with these matters? Of
course, these and some of other questions that we shall try to provide answers to on Good Morning Nigeria today, as we discuss the SDGs also, the journey so far. And we're coming to you on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA. I am Rhoda Anonam. You're welcome to the program.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I join my colleague, of course, Rhoda, and also welcome you to this edition of the program, in the course of which we shall have our regular companion segments, including newspaper review, business, sports, entertainment, and others. In the meantime, we go over now to our colleague, Anne Jibuno, for the morning news. Hi, Anne.
Hello, Kingsley and Rhoda. Good morning. Here's the news. After studying the report of the panel headed by Vice President Yemi Osinbajo, which investigated allegations against the suspended Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Mr. Babachir David Lawal, and the Director General, National Intelligence Agency, NIA, Ambassador Ayo Oke, President Muhammadu Buhari has terminated the appointment of Mr. Lawal and has appointed Mr. Boss Mustafa as the new secretary to the government of the Federation. The appointment takes immediate effect. A statement by the special advisor to the president on media and publicity, Femi Adesina, says the president also approved the recommendation to terminate the appointment of Ambassador Oke and has further approved the setting up of a 3-member panel to, among other things, look into the operational, technical and administrative structure of the agency and make appropriate recommendations. Meanwhile, the All Progressives Congress, APC, has commended President Muhammadu Buhari over the appointment of Mr. Boss Mustafa as a new secretary to the government of the Federation. The party believes the president could not have made a better choice. In a statement signed by the National Publicity Secretary of the APC, Malam Bolaji Abdullahi, it describes the new SGF as a competent, loyal and dedicated leader who over the years has demonstrated that he has a pan-Nigerian outlook. A chieftain of the All Progressives Congress and former governor of Lagos State, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, has expressed absolute confidence in the ability of President Muhammadu Buhari to transform Nigeria in line with the change agenda. Speaking to the media after a closed-door meeting with the president, Chief Tinubu also maintained that the governing APC is not only on course, but remained focused on meeting genuine national aspirations.
Fake news. I have confidence in this president. There's no doubt about that. We work hard to bring a government about. There are certain things that are unpredictable, and those are things that can lend itself to gossip, insinuations, and all of that. But once you create leadership and it's functioning, you don't have to babysit that leadership unless there's an erosion of confidence. And I don't have that. The APC government is on course, and we remain on course, and we will remain focused to those necessary things about, development, the welfare and progress of our people.
Nigeria and Côte d'Ivoire have resolved to chart a new course towards scaling up the existing bilateral relations between the two countries in critical sectors of their economies. This came to light after a high-level talk between President Muhammadu Buhari and his Côte d'Ivoire counterpart, Alassane Ouattara, in Abuja.
We need to strengthen the bilateral relationship between Côte d'Ivoire and Nigeria. This is what we discussed and committed ourselves to do so. Leadership of Nigeria is quite important to all of us, which is something obvious, but I think it needs to be said. And President Buhari has shown great leadership with the fight against Boko Haram, security in the sub-region, and also on economic matters. I expressed to him the fact that as an economist and having worked on Nigeria many years ago, I'm impressed by the measures which have been implemented to lift Nigeria out of recession.
Rivers State Governor Nyesom Wike says the success recorded by Operation Crocodile Smile 2 in flushing out criminals in the state has erased the initial misconception about their mission. Governor Wike stated this in a message to the closing ceremony of the operations in Iguruta, Ikwere local government area of Rivers State. Defense correspondent Ismail Musa reports that the Minister of Defense, Mansour Dan Ali, performed the ceremony.
The desired effects in reducing to the barest minimum the prevailing security challenges, including illegal oil bunkering, the militancy, kidnapping, cultism and pipeline vandalism.
I urge you all to remain focused and continue to maintain the highest standard of commitment, loyalty, and the observance of rules of engagement as you forge ahead.
The capacity of women living with HIV is being strengthened to take on advocacy role on their rights to sexual and reproductive health. Chimdimma Ndubisi reports that this is at a regional workshop of an international community of women living with HIV in West and Central Africa, holding in Abuja.
If a woman, a girl living with HIV/AIDS is empowered, then she can live a life free of oppression and stand her full rights at all times.
Women living with HIV in West and Central Africa, they'll put themselves across to work with women everywhere on our part of the world to have a say in accessing quality health services.
We desire more funding and a meaningful involvement of women living with HIV and AIDS.
The National Population Commission has commenced the Phase 4 enumeration area demarcation exercise in 13 local government areas in the country. Chairman of the commission, Eze Duru Ihioma, who at a media briefing in Abuja said the exercise will end on 19th of November this year. Well, that's the news on Good Morning Nigeria. The program continues shortly with Kingsley and Rhoda.
Unemployment, notably youth unemployment, features strongly in our party's manifesto. We intend to attack the problem frontally through revival of agriculture.
The 30K is going a long way. Actually, I bought an acre of land for 60K like 2012, and presently I have a cassava farm and a yam farm.
Kehinde suffers from indigestion. His twin Taiyi suffers from heartburn. Sometimes it's the other way around, or both. That's why they use Gaviscon Double Action. It soothes within 3 minutes and lasts for up to 4 hours. For double relief from heartburn and indigestion, Gaviscon Double Action.
Give me the value pack. Helen!
You do great value shopping.
Absolutely. I'm a champion at getting value.
Then you must have bought the Harpic 200 ml.
Why Harpic when I have
this? Even after applying them 10 times, they won't give a sparkling clean toilet.
Impossible.
Challenge. Detergent and bleach can't give a sparkling clean toilet even after 10 times. But Harpic 200 ml gives a sparkling clean toilet at one go.
Wow!
Harpic 200 ml. Real deal. Now only 200 naira.
Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, Sir Ahmadu Bello, Chief Obafemi Awolowo.
These patriots worked together to achieve independence for one united Nigeria. Although some may say Nigeria is a mistake, we all know that the Almighty never makes mistakes.
God has not made a mistake by bringing us all together in the way that He has brought us together. God has put us together here so that we can build a community that will be an example to the entire world.
One nation bound in freedom, peace and unity.
Nigeria, one nation, one people.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by NTA.
The Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, in collaboration with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture, the Made in Nigeria campaign. In the midst of unprecedented multiple challenges, our great country Nigeria, as Africa's largest economy, is surely marching on to a new era of all-round prosperity, especially through re-engineered and diversified economy, powerfully driven by the change agenda of President Muhammadu Buhari, GCFR.
We will patronize local entrepreneurs. We will promote the manufacturing powerhouses. Our objective is to make Nigeria a new manufacturing hub.
It is not time to complain. It is time to join the campaign. It is time for economic recovery, growth and diversification of our economy. By Made in Nigeria.
Hello and welcome back. If you've just joined us, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria on Africa's largest TV network, the NTA. Now let's bring you up to speed on business world as experts make case for deepening investment opportunities to include rural dwellers in the country. Details of these and more with our business news presenter, and that's Joy Uzo.
Welcome to Business News. Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, Godwin Emefiele, says Nigeria's return on investment in all sectors of the economy are among the best in the world, urging investors to invest in the country. Addressing a gathering of capital and money market players, investment bankers, treasurers and other fund managers at the London Stock Exchange recently, Emefiele affirmed that Nigeria is ready for business. At the forum organized by the London Stock Exchange in collaboration with the Nigerian Stock Exchange, Emefiele told the gathering of how Nigeria emerged from its worst recession in decades and revealed ongoing reforms and huge opportunities available to investors in various sectors of the economy, notably agriculture, solid minerals and infrastructure. Nigeria's Apex Bank had received commendations at different fora for its ingenious management of the foreign exchange market, which saw the recovery of the naira as well as the reforms in the funding of agriculture and the establishment of the investors and exporters window of the foreign exchange market. Governor Emefiele was accorded the honor to ring the opening bell for trading at the London Stock Exchange. Meanwhile, for Nigeria to attain overall growth, deliberate efforts must be made to extend investment opportunities to rural areas to ensure financial inclusion. Speaking to NTA Business News economic expert Nana Ude said the newly established Capital Market Investment Board should cater for rural communities who are mostly far away from the heart of activities.
We should look towards reversing the urban-rural migration so that we can have people either remain in the rural communities because there's an economy that is now being created, or even leave the urban economies to go and jumpstart the rural economy. So my advice to the board is to keep their eye on the ball and note that the task before them is quite a challenging one.
Now the Nigerian Stock Exchange opened the week in the green, with the all-share index gaining marginally by 0.06%. Nigeria's external reserves have hit $34 billion from $33.6 billion attained on October 25. Deputy Governor of Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, in charge of financial system stability, Joseph Nnana, who disclosed the latest figure at a forum in Lagos, said the exchange rate stability achieved so far by the Apex Bank had come to stay, explaining that the reserves have been appreciating very fast. After hitting $32 billion on September 18, the financial expert expressed confidence that the usual end-of-the-year rush would not push up the naira-dollar exchange rate, contrary to some people's expectations. The CBN chief said the investors and exporters foreign exchange window had performed beyond the bank's expectations, adding that forex inflows in the past few months were huge. Now, the World Bank has predicted that oil prices would rise to $56 a barrel in 2018 from $53 this year as a result of steadily growing demand, agreed production costs among oil exporters, and stabilizing United States shale oil production. In addition, the bank predicted that the surge in metals prices was expected to level off next year. Oil markets were stable on Monday, with Brent remaining above $60 per barrel. Now, economic growth is expected to rise to 3.4% in sub-Saharan Africa next year from 2.6% in 2017. The IMF, in a report on Monday, however, warned that rising debt and political risk in larger economies would weigh down future growth. The global lender therefore advised countries to diversify from dependence on commodities and oil, implement fiscal reforms and attract private investment to maintain growth. The IMF said public debt would rise to 53% of GDP this year from 48% in 2016. The report expressed concern over a worrying trend where most countries now borrow from local banks, saying this could destabilize the domestic financial sector and fuel inflation. That's business news. Good morning, Nigeria continues.
Thank you very much, Joy Uzo, for the business package. Next for us, we take a look at the front pages of today's newspapers in our newspaper review segment.
All right, welcome back. Our newspaper review, as always, Bayo Atoyebi is in the studio. Bayo.
Morning, Ruda.
Good to have you join us again this
Welcome
morning.
back.
Okay, of
Good
course,
morning,
it's the first time.
Yes, first time to see you. Yes. Good morning,
you.
Nigeria.
That's right.
All right, Kingsley.
Of course, here we have a potpourri of stories on the front pages of the papers this morning. The obvious story, of course, has to do with the appointment of the new secretary to the government of the Federation, consequent upon the firing of Abuja Lawal. So let's begin with you, Rhoda. I'm sure you have more papers than I do. So let's begin by exhausting the titles you got.
All right. Okay. We will begin with this day. You said it earlier. This day is our first paper this morning, and I'll begin with the lead story on this day. And the lead story: Boss Mustafa is new SGF. Babachiro okay to face prosecution. Boss Mustafa is new SGF as Babachiro okay to face prosecution. A couple of riders just below the lead story there. Presidency promises not to interfere in probe and, of course, aftermath. APC Oshomole louts Buhari over Boss Mustafa's appointment. And just above, now let's go to the top of the paper, above the nameplate. Federal government agrees to pay 88 billion naira as compensation to Nigerian civil war victims. And IMF debt service becoming a burden to Nigeria and others. That story is on page 44 of this day. Now let's move to the bottom of the paper, just beside the picture story there. Tinubu alleged rift with president is fake news. Tinubu alleged rift with president is fake news. Ahead of APC caucus neck meeting, protesters demand Oyegun's ouster. And that's a picture story there of Adamawa State Governor Jibrila Bindo, and of course the new secretary to the government of the Federation, Boss Gida Mustafa, and of course the Kogi State Governor Yaya Bello at the APC caucus meeting held here in Abuja. Those are the stories leading on the front page of this day.
Yeah, that's right. Let's take a look also at the leadership, because the list story for leadership has to do with the appointment of the new SGF. It says PM, that's President Muhammadu Buhari, appoints Boss Mustafa new SGF with a number of riders there on the front page. EFCC awaits Oshibajo committee report to begin Babachir and Oker's trial. And sack insulting to Nigerians. That's attributed to the PDP, of course. Details can be found inside the paper at page 6. Now, they must face wrath of the law. That's attributed to Serap. And APC lost appointment of new SGF. The photograph of the new SGF is right there also on the front page. Now, there's a story immediately beside that photograph, which has to do with the former President Goodluck Jonathan. Jonathan to Metu. Deposit 1 billion naira if you want me in court. That's a continuing story, by the way. And below that, you have Nigeria loses $13.7 billion to herdsmen farmers clashes. That's according to Abdul Salame, that's former military head of state. He was military head of state in 1998 to 1999. Now, below the nameplate of Leadership newspaper, two other headlines there. Senator Goje's wife, Yelwa, dies at 55. And states generate 821 billion naira as IGR in 2016. And that's according to the Governors Forum. Details of that story can be found on page 12. Bayo.
Yes. Well, Boss Gida Mustafa is the new secretary to the government of the Federation. Until his appointment, he was the managing director and chief executive of National Inland Waterways Authority. He's also been in the political circles before this time. He's a very tall, huge and imposing man, and he fits right into the position. It may be recalled that his appointment now followed the termination of the appointment of Babachir Lawal, who was suspended on April 18 due to complicity in the 200 million naira grass cutting, which a Senate committee investigated. Also terminated is the appointment of the Director General of the National Intelligence Agency, Mr. Ayo. Okay? You will also recall that the President has set up a 3-man committee which comprised the National Security Advisor, the Attorney General of the Federation, and was chaired by Mr. Vice President. The report was submitted to President Muhammadu Buhari on to 23rd of August. The Special Assistant to the President on Media, Garba Shehu, has indicated that the President is letting the institutions take their turn in doing their duties, and therefore is not interfering in the process. It is their due now to take up the report and act accordingly by following through investigation and prosecuting where necessary. The other story is about what has been reported as compensation of 88 billion for civil war victims. Actually, the compensation are in two folds. There's 50 billion for compensation to victims and 38 billion for the destruction of wartime ordinances comprising of about 689 landmines, 1,760 bombs, among which is one 250 kilogram bomb. You will recall during the Civil War, Ogunibe was very, very popular, which was one of the homemade bombs that was used during the Civil War.
Yeah, that was on the Biafran side.
On the Biafran side. There's about 493 victims that are said to be involved in the compensation. This was the outcome of the agreement between the parties at a court, ECOWAS Community Court.
All right, thank you very much, Bayo.
Just before, yes, brother, just before we proceed, perhaps, again, for purposes of situating this historically in recent history, when the President Muhammadu Buhari set up the Oshibajo Committee to look into the matters that often got referred to on the one hand as the grass cutting issue, and then the one involving the Osborne Towers. But the Oshibajo Committee worked on the assignment and completed it, but because he was then acting president, he couldn't then submit the report to himself, if you recall. And it was not until President Buhari returned that report was subsequently submitted to him. And one other point, I'm sure you recall this, if people watch back and then see what happened. When this matter broke in the Senate, there was all kinds of bluff and bluster at the time that the Senate was talking in quote border dash, and we have seen the consequence of that.
All right, very quickly, let's take a look at the other papers we have. I'll just pick a couple of headlines here. That's the Bio, you just talked about it now. That's leading on the Nigerian pilot. It says pay war victims 88 billion naira, ECOWAS court orders federal government. With a rider there, parties seek out-of-court settlement. Parties seek out-of-court settlement. I'll just quickly read two stories from here. IMF policy uncertainty restraining Nigeria's growth. That's on page 6. And also on page 6, Nigeria's external reserves hits $34 billion, says CBN. And also, very quickly, let's take a look at the Authority newspaper. The same lead story. Federal government agrees to pay Biafra civil war victims 88 billion naira compensation. And I think most of the other stories are stories that we've actually talked about earlier.
Yeah, let me just take a look also at the front page of New Telegraph. And there are a number of headlines. Some of the stories, again, we have also read from the others. But immediately below the nameplate, there are two headlines there that will take. Appeal Court affirms Jimoh Ibrahim's ownership of Newswatch. That story is on page 35. Now, Israeli firm takes over Nigeria's maritime security. That's on page 6 in greater detail. Then, of course, the APC leaders meeting on 2019 appointments and NWC tenure. I won't discuss Buhari's re-election. That's according to Tinubu. And then, of course, you have other headlines there. And then just below the photograph, and of course, below also the headline with regard to the sacking of the former Secretary of Government of the Federation on DGNIA, it says on page 7 in greater detail, red wine boosts fertility in women. I'll go quaffing red wine. Bye.
Well, let's look at the story relating to the former president, Goodluck Jonathan. He has asked the Federal High Court in Abuja to set aside the subpoena requiring him to appear in court, or in alternative, to ask Mr. Chief Olisemetu to provide a sum of 1 billion naira as his travel cost expenses from Otuoke. In an affidavit he disposed, he contended that Mr. Chief Olisemetu was neither his appointee, nor did he have any direct dealings with him. Therefore, it is only his appointee as president that had dealings with him, and they have no business calling him to come and explain. But it is a subject for the court to determine. Meanwhile, Kenya, there is election result. The Kenya Independent Electoral and Boundary Commission has declared Uhuru Kenyatta winner of the election. The election was so controversial in the sense that the turnout was about 35%. There were boycotts called by Raila Odinga, but Uhuru Kenyatta, in accepting, also said that he's sure that this victory today is just part of the process. It is likely to be subject of constitutional test in our country. The opposition, Raila Odinga, has called it as a farce.
All right, Baya Toebe, thank you for being here with us today. We'll see you tomorrow again for another edition of Newspaper Review.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let's take Good Morning Nigeria. We'll take a short break. When we return, of course, we'll be discussing how to deal with the drug demand affliction in the country.
Hate speech is not a joke. It incites genocide and crimes against humanity. Most of Africa's civil wars are caused by hate speech from one tribe against another. We don't want it here. The Nigerian government stands firm against hate speech.
I was distressed to notice that some of the comments, especially in the social media, have crossed our national red lines by daring to question our collective existence as a nation. This is a step too far.
One nation bound in freedom, peace and unity.
Nigeria, one nation, one people.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by NTA.
Kehinde suffers from indigestion. His twin Taiyi suffers from heartburn. Sometimes it's the other way around, or both. That's why they use Gaviscon Double Action. It soothes within 3 minutes and lasts for up to 4 hours. For double relief from heartburn and indigestion, Gaviscon Double Action.
Helen! Your kitchen gets 10 out of 10.
Thank you.
This also gets a 10. Should we see the toilet now?
Sure.
This gets just 1.
It is clean.
But not perfect 10.
Better than my detergent and bleach? Impossible.
Challenge? Try the new Apic 10X.
Compared to bleach and detergent, Apic sticker formulation removes yellow stains times better, giving you a sparkling clean toilet.
Wow.
Now you also take that
Apic 10X challenge.
Also available in 200 ml pack.
Hold it! Me! I don't come out my hand from oil bunkering. General, what you gonna yarn? What did the yarn say? I don't understand though. Because they spoil our water and our environment. And they cause our people serious harm. Militants say, you know good. Me! I not do again Sam. Because why? Change begins with me. General Tombu!
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
All right, welcome back. You're still watching Good Morning Nigeria on the NTA. Our subject for discussion this morning is, of course, on the drug demand reduction. And to set the stage to our discussion is this background report put together by Joy Osiagu.
The 1988 Convention Against Illicit Traffic in Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances describes drug demand reduction as policies or programs directed towards reducing the consumer demand for narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances covered by the International Drug Control Conventions. No country can be said to be free from the menace of drug demands and drug trafficking, and it has become pertinent for world leaders to rise up against the challenge. The distribution of these narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances is forbidden by law or limited to medical and pharmaceutical channels. The U.S. Department of State says the suffering and damaging consequences of drug abuse know no geographic, economic, social, religious or ethnic bounds, and this reflects the devastating toll on the health and welfare of our countries. And as part of measures of reducing the menace, specific goals for the International Demand Reduction Program are highlighted to include reduction in drug use, delayed onset of use, reduction in morbidity caused by drug use, reduction in criminal behavior, reduction in drug-related violence, reduction in gang membership, establishment of self-sustained drug prevention, education and treatment programs. To contribute her troops in this war, Nigeria established the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, NDLEA, to cut off the supply of drugs and other substances of abuse, tracing and recovering the proceeds from drug-related engagements and other related matters as they concern drugs. The NDLEA has boasted of some major successes with large hauls of drugs confiscated at border crossings. Just in 2015, narcotics worth 3.7 billion naira were seized at the Murtala Mohammed International Airport in Lagos, and this includes 172 kilograms of cannabis, 160 kilograms of ephedrine, 114 kilograms of methamphetamine, 96 kilograms of cocaine, 45 kilograms of tramadol and 5 kilograms of heroin. But critics have said these are still not enough, as more still needs to be done to rid the country of drug trafficking. The growing cases of substance abuse among youths has become so alarming that many say if nothing is done quickly to address the trend, the future of the country is bleak. That perhaps explains why the UN's 2016 World Drug Report says Nigeria has the third largest quantity of cocaine seized around the world, with 50 to 70% of the drug trafficked by air, and making Nigeria to remain a hub of organized drugs crime. As part of the global fight against drug demand and trafficking, Nigeria has put in place legislation against the abuse and trafficking of narcotic and psychotropic substances, and has also been a major signatory to bilateral or multilateral conventions against drug trafficking in the world. All these make the issue of drug demand reduction, which deals with policies, programs aimed at cutting off supply, treatment, rehabilitation and support to drug victims, as well as enlightenment programs on the dangers, effect, consequences of drug abuse very necessary. Now, what are the drug reduction demand policies of Nigeria? Who is supposed to do what to cut off supply, rehabilitate drug victims, punish offenders? Where are the designated centers for treatment of victims? Which enlightenment programs does the country have on the menace? These are some of the questions guests on Good Morning Nigeria will be addressing shortly.
All right, thank you very much there, correspondent Oyemi Ajayi, for that background report. But of course, the background report focuses essentially also on the supply side. If you recall, Rhoda, we had indicated that the principal focus for our discussion this morning has to do with the demand side. In other words, we'll also be exploring, as it were, the economic law of demand and supply. There are suppliers out there, we keep hearing about reports of seizures and seizures. These are matters relating to supply. What about demand? Who are those demanding for this? How do we deal with that?
And we're also looking at how we can cut demand through treatment, essentially.
All right. Okay, we have guests with us to tackle this matter. First, we would like to welcome at this time the Director General of the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, that's the NDLEA, Mrs. Raleigh Bode-George. Mrs. Bode-George, a pleasure to have you join us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Nice to be here again.
And also we have joining us via Skype from Port Harcourt. He is Dr. Williams Ebiti. He is a Community Intervention Network on Drugs. Dr. Williams Ebiti, it's good to have you join us.
Very much. Good morning, viewers.
And also we have joined us from our Kaduna Network Center, Joseph Ogbonna. He is EK Milestones Rehabilitation Foundation. Mr. Ogbonna, it's good to have you join us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning, it's good to be here.
All right. Well, Rhoda and I had attempted, as it were, layperson's perspective on what the issues are with regard to drug demand or demand for illicit drugs. We have the NDLEA chieftain right here with us. We keep hearing, as we indicated earlier, reports of seizures and trafficking and all of that. But of course, people traffic these things, people supply these drugs because there is a demand for it. But what exactly do we know about the demand for psychotropic and other substances?
Thank you for the question. The truth of the matter is that we just came back from the United Nations, and we discussed a thematic discussion on drug demand reduction. It is true, yes, that the demand, but we have to look, what we're not doing is looking at the underlying causes of drug abuse. And we keep talking about, yes, the supply, if we reduce the supply, maybe the demand reduce, but that really is not really the issue. And lately, internationally, we're looking at it from a multi-pronged approach, a holistic approach. And what are we trying to say? There are some root causes that are fundamentally causing these drugs. Why would a child suddenly take drugs? And lately, we remember that I said last week that NDLA has a program called Drug Anonymous. And based on that program, we've been looking at the new trends as to why people use drugs. And there are a lot of it's mostly a lot of pressure. And unfortunately, it comes from the parents. At least 90% of those who are in our facility say their parents have forced them to do courses that they don't want to do, and they're under pressure and they don't understand, and they kick to drugs. People say it's mostly peer pressure. Yes, that is a cause, but the fundamental root causes are the problem. So people say even if we remove all the drugs from which is really not possible, at the end of the day, what will happen to these children who do not have any avenue to relieve their stresses and tensions? So I think that we have to look at it from a holistic point of view. Yes, we're removing the supply, but what is making these people go? Or suddenly there's a new burst of women in the not using drugs. What is causing it? It can't be peer pressure because they're elderly people. So there are fundamental problems with the family system, and that is what we need to strengthen. And I was saying about 2 weeks ago on your program that we need to understand that it's not a one-way thing. Oh, I just see the drugs, I take it, the peer pressure. No. For example, look at the new policies that we have. You're building up a place. You build up the whole place. There's no place for a child to go and to play. So when he comes back from school and he has his excess energy, where does he expand the energy? The child of a rich man will play his iPad, but the child of the poor man, where is he going to go to? If you leave these open spaces for them, they'll have places. And I keep saying that when I was telling them at the last Council for Women that when you do all these policies, women have to get involved in these things and look for what's happening to our youths. What are they doing with their leisure time? What are you making available? If you build up the whole place and you say that we should do, even if you remove all the drugs, they'll find something else to abuse because they abuse lizards, donkeys, they abuse toilet, go to pit latrines. Are we going to remove all the pit latrines in Nigeria? So the fundamental root causes are what we need to deal with and look at all stakeholders involved so that we have a multi-pronged approach and we deal with the matter holistically.
All right, Mrs. Bodejo, thanks a lot. We'll come back to you in the course of the conversation. Let's go over now to Dr. Williams Ebiti. We earlier introduced him as with us via Skype. Dr. Ebiti, from your perspective, what are the factors driving drug demand?
I think I want to say that problematic drug use is not a criminal justice problem. Neither is it best understood as maybe a pharmacological or a medical problem. If anything, it is more of a psychosocial problem. And so generally young people will keep experimenting on things and drugs. That does not necessarily make it a problematic drug use. However, when it gets to the point of being problematic drug use, there are a whole lot of factors that could actually be responsible for it. Drugs are highly available almost everywhere. And it is almost an impossible task to win the war on drugs. In other words, removing drugs in its entirety. And so when people do not have good socioeconomic background, they are not having good education, they do not have jobs, and so on and so forth, drugs will be the next best thing to keep them, that's company. So these are some of the factors that may be responsible for a higher number of people developing problematic drug use. And of course, we are seeing that in our country.
Okay, well, thanks. Well, let's also get the view from Ogbonna Ike from our Kaduna Network studios. You listen to the other two guests. From your perspective, What are the issues driving demand for illicit drugs in Nigeria?
Yes, I think I agree with both the previous speakers, the DG of the NDLEA and Dr. Ibiti, that this is a complex problem. It's not a simple thing. We have young people, old people, women. It cuts across almost every sector of the community as we know it. And it is not due to just one cause. There are social factors, there are psychological factors, there are medical factors, and the interplay of all of these things is what is essentially driving the demand for drugs. What we do know, however, is that problematic drug use, or what we call drug dependence, is one of the highest drivers of demand, meaning that if we address people who are dependent on drugs, not just those who are casually using drugs, if there are interventions that deal with people who are dependent or addicted to drugs, we should see a significant decline in the demand for drug use.
All right, thank you very much, Joseph Obunna Ike. Well, let's get back to the DG of the NDLEA. You just said now that you just returned from United Nations and there's a new policy on this issue of drug demand reduction. What is this new policy?
It's not a new policy. What they're saying, we have the outcome document of UNGAS.
Okay.
And what they're saying is to have a multi-pronged approach where all stakeholders, not just government, but also the civil society organizations, different agencies and departments of government, regional cooperation in the fight for this drug dependency, to reduce the drug dependency. So what are we doing in Nigeria, for example? In Nigeria now we have a master plan, and the master plan has about 36 ministries, departments, and agencies of government. And it has it's put on 4 pillars, but the main pillar we're talking about today is drug demand reduction. So we have the drug demand reduction, and what happens? So we have the area of sensitization, which NDLA does. We have treatment and rehabilitation. And treatment and rehabilitation is the part that Ministry of Health, and then we also have people like Ministry of Information coming in. We have the Women Affairs. We have we also have NACA, because we also have vulnerable population like sex workers, people who inject drugs and things like that. So what are we doing? So rather than use resources that we have and duplicate them on different things, we have a joint approach and say, okay, we're doing sensitization. Health will go to the people in the schools. We will reach out to different maybe departments. So we put it in different areas. For example, okay, we do referrals now. So we know the things that NDLA can deal with. Right now we have what we call assist. It's a kind of what we do to take. If a person comes into your rehabilitation, we have 1 to 27. When you're over 27, you know it's not a counseling case. So you refer them to a facility. For example, we have 11 in the country now, which we've just upgraded, with the EU project, which has been implemented by UNODC. So we're doing upgrade now, we've done capacity building. So what are we doing now? For example, now we have law enforcement training side by side with health officials to ensure that we don't criminalize those who use drugs. I know the law looks as if it's that, but now deliberately by practice, we do not criminalize those who use drugs anymore. So what we're trying to do is to encourage people to come in, even sex workers. People say, look, they've got to have access to treatment so that things like HIV, hepatitis, which are the fallouts of injecting drugs, will be dealt with. As we now know from that HIV has gone down, but hepatitis has gone up. So so we look at it from different areas. Now it's a joint thing rather than just NDLA or just health dealing with the issue.
Well, for the purpose of this discussion, we're basically looking at treatment as a way of cutting down. And you said quite a lot about enlightenment, about things that you have done in the past, things that are being done in schools, to enlighten young people not to use drugs. But statistics has shown that most of these approaches that we have used over time has not been as effective as treatments. And of course, we're looking at treatment now as a new method for cutting down or reducing the demand for drugs.
First of all, treatment isn't a new method. It's always been there.
Okay. It's
just that we're doing more things. For example, like I discussed when we went to the end, we used to do sensitization. We're doing things evidence-based now. So any intervention that we do in Nigeria now, we look at the scientific evidence for it. For example, I'll give you a typical one, Unplug. Unplug is done basically by Ministry of Education, targeting children at the age of 14. We believe that if it's a tailored intervention for people and the right message, because sometimes you give a message that is not right for a child, and it might only encourage the child to use more drugs. From that scientific study, at least 23%, we had a 23% reduction of those who use drugs in the pilot study. And the study has worked. It's not been exactly, but it's a step in the right direction. We tailored interventions, for example, in areas like sex workers. So what are we doing? We now have HIV counseling, which we didn't have before. That is working. And one of the things that we realize is that a lot of people, whether you want to believe it or not, drug issues are stigmatized in Nigeria. Being dependent on drugs is just like having blood pressure or diabetes. And people have to understand it's a sickness. That's one. We are dealing with the stigma. Before, I remember the very first time I told people about drug issues, and also it could be in anybody's house, so I'm giving them my personal experience. People were like shocked. People clapped. They were not clapping for me because I made a good, they were clapping for me because they thought, for one, somebody's bringing it to the front burner. And that's one of the issues. So the first thing is to deal with the stigmatization that we have attached to it. That's one. And now we have social media attached to it. A lot of women and people who need help. Now I'm not talking about even those who are dependent on drugs, the carers. Because half the time, the people who care for those who are drugs are the ones that are even worse off because the pressure on them. But where do they go to? Because each time I come to you and I say, oh, my child is on drugs, you say, you didn't look after your child well. But that's not really necessarily the case. It could be peer pressure, it could be school pressure, it could be psychological, it could be a broken home, a lot of dysfunctional families. So this social media allows you to access help anonymously without being stigmatized. And if the people feel like, okay, I'm a mother, my son is on drugs, how do I go and get help without being attached a bad mother? So these are the new interventions.
That's Mrs. Bodejo, thanks a lot. Maybe we're having now the equivalent of Alcoholics Anonymous with regard to dealing with drug issues. We have another guest who is joining us from our Lagos Network studios. It's Wilson Igodalo. He's president, Drug Salvation Foundation. You can see him there on the right side of your screen. Mr. Igodalo, our pleasure to have you join us on the program this morning. And straight away, let's get you into the conversation, namely by getting your own perspective. Our principal concern this morning has to do with dealing with drug demand. In other words, drug demand reduction. Once there's a decrease in demand, so the saying goes, then the suppliers probably could be out of commission. What are your thoughts?
Good morning, Nigeria. We are very concerned about this very situation that is escalating every day. A lot of you are actually involved in drug, and we are looking at different angles. Like, for example, youth who are actually in secondary school, they're already experimenting drug. And we are very concerned. That is why we are looking at this very category that we are, for example, now, there are 4 categories of drug. We are looking at experimenting, we are looking at the experimented, we are looking at so many areas. So we actually try to see if we can be able to catch them young. So that's why we are very, very putting more pressure, going to school to talk about drug, going to, so many areas of where we can be able to catch them young. So that's why we actually stay focusing. We are just very happy that we are becoming so aware now that there is a drug problem. And we're also very aware now that even the government are also beginning to wake up to take to their responsibility that there is actually a problem, because we have to create a future for the young people. We have to create a future for Nigeria, because they say a healthy nation is a good nation. So we are very concerned. So that is why we are working very hard to see that at least the education, the education of drug abuse, the awareness is everybody doorstep now. Is everybody, we beginning to sensitize more people to get aware of this drug abuse.
All right, thank you very much, Wilson Igodalo. Now, let's get to Dr. Ibite. Dr. Ibite, I'm particular this morning about the aspect of treatment as a way of reducing demand, because some of the ways that we have tried to curb these in the years, like enlightenment in schools, NOA, we have adverts on television, parents are talking about it. The peer pressure, yes, everybody is saying there's a reason why this is happening. So we're talking to the kids, we're talking to people on the streets, we're talking to, a lot of people are different places where people are using drugs. We're talking, we're giving, advice not to use drugs. But then there seems not to be, the percentage with which we want it to reduce has not been there. Could treatment also be a way? Because statistics has also shown that 80% of people who are stopped using drugs or are on treatment don't demand for the drugs.
Thank you very much. I think just quickly before my comment, I want to say that I'm very impressed with the position of NDLEA at this point, because it is time for us, instead of the ideology of fear, moral panic, we should look to science and research and evidence to inform drug laws, policies, and practices within the country. Now, the proportion of people who use drugs that require treatment are very small. However, that small number constitutes the greatest demand for drugs. For example, about maybe 10 to 15% of people who use drugs generally would have problematic drug use and may require treatment. But those set of people, are the ones that are taking about 80 to 90% of the drugs generally that is actually available. So if there is treatment for people who use drugs, because we see it as, that's as a medical problem. If we see it, those who have problematic drug use, if there's treatment for them, the demand for drug would reduce incredibly, alongside with other things that we are supposed to do, like psychosocial interventions and, creating jobs, making it possible for them to go to school, having a good livelihood and all that. All these things come together to assist people who will require treatment for drugs. So yes, I agree that if there is adequate treatment for people who have problematic drug use, it will reduce the demand for drugs.
Well, still with you, Dr. Ebito, the point was made earlier that a challenge arises when there is a problematic usage of drugs, and that early on we find adolescents or other young persons experimenting with a variety of drugs, and then eventually they get to let this go. But looking at the full panoply, if you like, of the demand and then the supply issues relating to drugs, what, in your opinion, from what we know about the Nigerian situation, are the critical elements that we need to recognize with regard to the causative factors pressing the demand or pushing the demand for drugs?
The point that we should note here is that, will drugs always be available? The answer is an absolute yes. And I think that we may need to move away from fighting a losing battle, because there is no country in the world that would actually be able to eradicate drugs per se, and possibly the demand for drugs. That could be reduced. Now, most people in the country are using drugs that they don't even know what they are using. For example, if you go to the street of Kaduna, you will see people selling drugs in wheelbarrows. These drugs are not labeled. They are just in capsule. Nobody knows what they are taking. Nobody knows the strength of the drug that is taking, and so on and so forth. This is because drugs is being managed by the criminal gangs. They are the ones that are selling the drugs. The prohibitionists are the ones that are, that are putting it out there. So nobody knows what is actually taking. We believe that if it is decriminalized, if the government has legal regulation for drugs and so on, they will be able to know exactly what people are taking. Now, why has sensitization and education not worked so far? It's good, but the messaging has been poor. For example, when you tell people just say no to drugs, what does it mean? It doesn't mean anything to a child. Or when you tell a child that once you take drugs that you're going to go mad, and he sees his friends taking drugs and they're the coolest guys in the place, they will take drugs. So I think that as far as we are going to continue with sensitization, we have to get the messaging right, so that we can get young people to recognize that, yes, drugs may be this, may be that, but the outcome may be this, may be this. And then, we help them develop skills, resilience, which is very important for young people, so that they will be able to make the right decisions at every point in time and possibly avoid the bad consequences that come from drug use.
All right, Dr. Ebito, thank you very much. I mean, the point you just made now with regard to some persons rejecting certain kinds of message. Look, if you take hard drugs, you probably will go mad. They will say, oh, look, their friends are taking this and they are the coolest guys. I recall one gentleman several decades ago, he was, of course, abusing some of these substances. And at some point, he said that he was having impulses running around in his brain. Well, of course, he lost his way eventually. All right, so but let's bring in Bodaike back into the conversation from our Kaduna Network studios. Bodaike, again, now looking at the issues with regard to demand, Dr. Ebito has talked about one critical element. To say, yes, ultimately, you have to have sensitization, but it would appear that the content of the message, that is to say, the messaging is poor in its own from its own perspective. What else do you think has been lacking in terms of actually seeking to deliver the right message to the right audience at the right time on the issue of drug demand reduction?
Yes, thank you. Earlier in the show, Rhoda mentioned an article on the Global Drug Commission by Dr. Wonak, and he pointed out that this is not a problem that is unique or peculiar to just Nigeria. When it comes to sensitization, it often seems like the most attractive option because a relatively small amount of money goes into printing a poster and saying say no to drugs in schools. And so it is usually the favorite option for a lot of preventive measures. But like the director of NDLEA said, and I must say I share Dr. Ibiti's admiration for the new direction that the NDLEA is taking on this matter. We need to actually do a scientific study on what works, what is the effect of this message. In some cases, it may not be possible to actually prevent people in their entirety from experimenting with drugs. Remember that when you are young, that is the stage at the age range that you generally experiment with everything. So we may need to look at what are the objectives we are trying to achieve. Are we trying to prevent young people from experimenting? That may not be possible, but can we delay the age at which they experiment? Because we know from science that a younger person experimenting with drugs has a much higher chance of becoming dependent on that. So can we get the kids that are 13, 14, 12 to hold off on experimenting with drugs until perhaps when they are older and their brains are a bit more developed and the chances of them becoming dependent is lower? The other thing we can look at is, can we look at the harms associated with this experimentation? For example, do we want to find ways to completely discourage things like inhaling fumes, which could lead to sudden death, or injecting drugs, which of course the risks go beyond just addiction and to hepatitis, like the Director General mentioned? Do we want to see how we can eliminate such extremely harmful types of experimentation? And also, can we look at some of the background causes? The Unplugged program that she referenced also addresses some of these issues. Young people generally, when they are at that age of adolescence, have a lot of issues that they need to be resolved. And if these issues, if there's no alternative means of resolving those issues, experimenting with drugs becomes not just a viable option, but possibly the best option because it is a quick response. And then when it comes to issues of treatment, one of the other things that we must be clear on is that treatment is not one thing. Like the Director General mentioned, addiction is a disease, and drug dependence actually has varying degrees of severity. We have those that are on the lower end of the severity and those that are on the higher end of the severity. We cannot expect everyone to be treated at just the 11 facilities we have in this country that are being upgraded. There must be some kind of community-based intervention, particularly those that are low threshold in general, so that the same way people go to general hospitals, primary care centers, specialist centers, and then move through the different levels of care, there needs to be different levels of care available for the different levels of severity when it comes to the issues of drug dependence. And when we put all of these interventions together, none of them standing alone, because that's another key thing, is that each intervention must be interlinked with the other. No intervention can stand alone to deal with the issue at hand. We should see a remarkable decrease in the demand for drugs.
All right, thank you very much, Ogbonna Ike there. But I'd like to get back to Dr. Ibitimi. Ogbonna Ike just highlighted some of the elements that could actually lead to drug demand reduction. Let's still look at this. Well, what are these elements? What more elements, could we add to them?
One of the other things that we can bring to bear is, for example, women. That in my own opinion is another population that is completely ignored in the country, especially in the northern part of the country where they do not have access to treatment. So can we consciously begin to engage the women population who are actually using drugs and have problematic drug use? Most of them, because of the cultural barriers, do not have access to treatment and cannot even go to the hospitals. Now, can something be done for that kind of population to come out? Because remember that most most of the children are being educated by women, the mothers. And if the mothers are highly dependent on drugs, it causes a lot of problems. Some of them may be pregnant. So that is an element that, for example, a group of people, Milestone seems to be working in Kaduna and Kano axis to begin to put up an evidence-based, a scientific platform to understand how to better engage this group of population within that region and see if they can scale it up to the cultures in Nigeria that are similar to what we have in Kano. We feel that if this is done, I mean, children within the schools, the adult, the males are already having all the opportunities. The commercial sex workers and peoples of likes are also having a platform for engagement. But women in general who are in PUDA and all that do not have that kind of platform. So we feel that if something like that is in place, then we may be having a more holistic kind of approach. And of course, workplace, the demands of workplace has also made many people to possibly turn to drugs, not as if it is a cause, but it may be a contributing factor. And so we are also beginning to think about healthy lifestyles within the workplace and understanding the fact that this is a problem that can be addressed. I believe that some of these would be of help in possibly having a holistic approach to the issue of drug demand reduction.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Ibitimi. We're getting your tweets already via our Twitter handle at NTAGMN. Let's take some of our tweets now, and we'll get back to our discussion. Our very first tweet is from Dilly Jackson Solomon. He says, the government cannot do this alone. NGOs should help in supervising and monitoring drug abuse activities and programs within the country.
We have this from Festus Akimboyo, where the government at all levels should create an environment where our young people will not have easy access to drugs.
Omogbola Babs tweets, our family value system is eroded. We must bring back that family values where children and words respect parents' opinion than their peer groups. Many parents are preoccupied with the pursuit of their career, including mothers. Therefore, children are left at the mercy of societal influence.
Another one again from Festus Akimboya, where parents have a major role to play in effective drug demand reduction. Parents must educate their children on the damaging dangers of drugs and set boundaries around drug use.
Dribrila in our tweets, special topics should be included in the subject in school curriculum right from nursery on, and when, how, and for why to use drugs, firstly.
Ibrahim Tudu tweet says, we want to hear about strategies deployed to hit our drug supply, consumption, dependency, and rehabilitation. Looks like NDLEA is overwhelmed. We have earlier indicated that our principal concern for us this morning has to do with drug demand reduction, and all the issues pertaining to that matter are what our guests are already talking about. Just before we bring in the DG NDLEA again, let's return to our Lagos Network studios where Weston Igodalo is still with us. Mr. Igodalo, with regard to targeting specific groups and therefore the proper message to send to them on aspects of sensitization, where do you think that we had got it wrong in the past, or where do you think we had not been very effective, and what therefore should we do?
In Nigeria. Ike actually just said that say no to drug is not working. That is exactly true. But from our side, from our NGO, we have been focusing on a particular area, which is because we discovered that curiosity and urbanization factor is actually still driving this drug use. So what we decided to deploy is to deploy people which we feel that the youth actually looking up to as role model. From our NGO, what we decided to do, we started working with celebrity to see how we can be able to use celebrity to add their voice to this cause. And what we've been doing is producing video, taking celebrity that they look up to schools to speak to youth. Because really, if you look at what the kind of video they produce nowadays, the kind of film content, is actually still driving this drug abuse. So when they now see all those people face to face and they are talking about drug abuse that is not good, it's not cool, and is destroying their purpose, is destroying their dream, I believe it will sink into them. So that is why we have been using celebrity to actually just drive this message home. And it has been working for, I will not really tell you, we cannot really give you the data, but it has been working for us. And these celebrities we're even talking about, now those are people also committed. And those are people we feel that they have actually crossed that thin line between, you know, saying they used to take drugs before, they don't use to take drugs before. They are looking at celebrities who have actually made name for themselves, who actually have this positive image. So that's what we'll be using to actually just go to schools. We go to so many places, we organize seminars, we organize conferences to actually just preach to these people, to preach to these young people. Because those people, they are role models. So that's what we'll be doing our own little way, to see that, you know, they look up to this celebrity, they say, okay, for this man to be there at this top of his ladder, at this top of his career, I believe he's not using drugs. So then we'll look up to them and see, okay, I'm not going to use drugs, because some of them, they just feel that those celebrities actually use drugs for them to act, for them to do film, for them to do so many things like that. So we are seeing the result in our own little way anyway. So that is why we are still using this celebrity to create sensitization, and we are still using more, we are still creating more avenue, we are still coming up with more ideas to see that we can be able to impact in our youth. And we are very happy that we have very, very supportive celebrity that we will be using. And with that, NDLA will be supporting us seriously in that regard. So that's what we'll be using to actually create awareness, use it to create sensitization in our little way.
All right, thank you very much, Wilson Ighodalo. You're joining us from our Lagos Network Center. We're still looking at drug demand reduction. We still have with us the DG of the NDLEA here with us in the studio, and of course a couple of other guests from different locations across the country. We'll take a short break now. When we come back, we'll be more on this issue.
Nigerians. Suicide bombers are not spirits. They are not ghosts. They are human beings like you and me. They live amongst us. They are your neighbors. They are your friends today, but terrorists tomorrow. So you must know your neighbor now. Security begins with you and me. Know your neighbor. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects, and movements to the police and other security agencies. The security of our nation is a duty for you and me.
If you see something, say something. Nigeria, unite against terrorism.
This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
All right, welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of Africa's largest television network, the Nigerian Television Authority. Now let's bring in again the Director General of NDLEA, Mrs. Raleigh Bode George. A number of ideas, of course, have been raised by the other guests, including yourself, with regard to how the country is approaching the issue of drug demand reduction. But one point you mentioned earlier has to do with a master plan. Can we have some greater insight into what this whole master plan is all about with regard to dealing with drug demand reduction, and who are therefore the principal drivers in the master plan?
Okay, so we have, like I said earlier, we have 36 agency departments of government that are involved. And what we decided to do is a multi-pronged approach using interagency cooperation. But I want to make a comment first, which is something that I noticed from all the speakers. We've got to be careful when we are talking about drug demand reduction, because we have to move towards ensuring that our interventions are tailored specific. And that's exactly what we talked about at the United Nations at the last thematic discussions. For women, what you would do for a woman would not be the same as what you would do for a child in the youth. So what we've decided to do is we've done a drug survey. We've done the drug survey, which has been concluded. Now we got from the drug survey, they're analyzing the data, so the data will come out, the full report will come out somewhere early next year. But one of the things that we found out from the raw data is that we're able to identify vulnerable groups. And identifying the vulnerable groups, we found youths in schools, youths out of schools, sex workers. We were able to find out that those were the main drivers, and lately we found out women. Now, if you're going to do interventions, one of the things that we knew is that, especially that kept recurring at the UN, was gender-specific interventions. And like I said to them when we were discussing, I said, look, yes, you have interventions, but realize that what will work in America might not work in Nigeria, because we have women that are in PUDA who don't come out. So you need to take cognizance of the culture of the people here. So like I said at the Northern Women's Governors' Wives Forum, that look, people need to reach out to women who are in the houses, who have issues. And let's understand what I keep asking people that we can't just be dealing with the drug issue, we are dealing with the underlying root causes. So a woman is taking drugs and it's getting worse. What is causing these drug issues? Or what are causing these drug issues? And from my point of view,
how does the master plan focus on this?
Yeah, so we have
just a minute, madam. There are 36 MDAs you say that are involved in this. What are those MDAs or some of the MDAs? What is the specific role and what is the connectivity amongst all of this? Are there also NGOs involved? Are there professionals involved?
Yes, we have. First of all, the master plan is a 5-year plan. It's funded by the EU and it's been implemented by the UNODC, that is the United Nations Office on Drug and Crime. And what we've done is that we have, under the drug demand reduction period, which is the period we're talking about, we have different areas. We have the sensitization, we have treatment and aftercare, and we have social rehabilitation involved in this. So we have different agencies doing different things. For example, we have women affairs, we have education dealing with those in schools, and we talked about the Up-Block program that targets those in age 14. We have NACA, the Agency for AIDS Reduction. They are dealing with a lot with the sex workers. So we have different activities. Every time in the plan, during the year, we have an operational plan. And that operational plan is costed and has different activities, and they're done by different agencies of government. And some are done interagency, like for example, the last training that NACA did for HIV counseling was done with us, the police, those that are in law enforcement, to ensure that there's no criminalization. That was one. Then in the area of sex workers, they have HIV, they have what they call the community toolkit, which has just been developed. And so that toolkit can be done in the community, so everybody can do it. So that's two. I'm just giving you, asking you, how is it done? So we have the different activities. Like for example, Ministry of Information now, we've now put them in. So what we're trying to do is that those that are information, they've now asked for training. So NDLA is now training them on issues. So if they're going to address drug issues on television or things like that, it's from an informed perspective. That's another area that we're dealing with. Then we also realize that there's a lot of pressure in people like those who are in law enforcement, those who go to fight and all that. So we also train counselors in that area. Then in the prison settings, we have those in the prison settings. All these are all in the master plan. They all have different activities. It's online. You can actually see it on our website. You can see the master plan. And we also have soft and e-copies. And we've given it to and we've done advocacy to all ministers, the past ones. So we now know that we have new PAMSECs and things like that. So we continue to do advocacy. So it's a multi-pronged approach. Everybody is involved.
You talked about the MDAs that are involved, Ministry of Information and Culture, that's at the federal level, Ministry of Women Affairs. How does this cascade to the subnational governments, states and local governments?
Okay, so we have state drug committees. So everything that happens at the federal level is replicated at the state level. And the governor is the overall chairman of the state drug committees. So in the same way we have health and education, we have agriculture, we also have agriculture because we're doing alternative livelihood as well to ensure that those farmlands are used for other things that can bring the same amount of money, because at the end of the day, those who are producing want it for a livelihood. So we have those state drug committees, but it's not legal backed by law. So what we do is that we go and do advocacy and say this needs to be done, that needs to be done. So we've been doing that. So it's replicated down the line and has a reporting system, because within the master plan we have the M&E, the monitoring and evaluation pillar. So everything that's done down is reported up. So every time we have quarterly meetings to find out what is working, what is not working, to deal with those issues as well.
What is your M&A indicating now? That's in the period that you've been implementing the master plan. What is the feedback?
Okay, the first feedback, we found out that in the areas of school we have done well. In the area of sex workers, we found out there was a lot of criminalization, and we didn't know how to deal with that. So what we decided to do when we had the last interministerial committee meeting was to ensure that, okay, let's train law enforcement side by side with health officials to see if we can work together to ensure that they can access treatment and they're not criminalized. And that has been working. That first step actually I was at that training. It was an eye-opener, because when I first of all saw the sex worker, I mean, you know, sometimes it's difficult when people are actually so rude to you and you still have to help them. So we had to deal with that. We had to learn how to deal with the attitudes of different people. So that worked. Then we found out something that we didn't know before. We had the drug survey, which we had never done before. So we have done the drug survey. Then we identified that there was another vulnerable group, which were the youths in school. And we started asking, why are the youths in school taking drugs? Because they're doing well. Then we realized, and this is from the Drug Anonymous, which we lead in NDLA, and this is evidence-based, over 90% of the people that are in our facilities say they are there because their parents have forced them to do courses they don't want to do. They're under pressure, they can't do well in school, at the end of the day, they're into drugs. So that pressure, And that's one of the things that I also thought that at least we should bring up. That it's good that parents know that half of the time they're the ones that cause actually the problems. And I remember one of the guys in the council was telling me, he said, anyway, why would my mother force me to do a drug? How will I do it? And she said, I'm failing. I'm failing because I'm not doing the right course.
But then, a good master plan. My question now is, can anybody who is on drugs just walk into any medical facility and say, I need help?
In terms of the first thing you could do, you can't walk in. But let's be honest, is treatment not expensive? Because you're going to pay. What we need to do, and that's where the NGOs come in, because treatment is expensive in Nigeria, unfortunately. In a lot of countries, it's subsidized. But we don't subsidize that much. For example, in NDLA, we don't charge anything for treatment. But how many facilities? We have one across every state. But not all of them are in-house. So we have outpatient counseling, but we do have some in-house. And even in the in-house ones, they even need to be upgraded, you know, and which is part of the master plan is upgrading. But in terms of health, you can walk in, but you must pay. And then a guy who is on drugs, that has just finished taking drugs and wants help, can he actually bring out money when he has used all his money for drugs? So we need to be realistic. It's, yes, the treatment, but we need to be subsidized.
But then how many hospitals in the country have these facilities?
That have been upgraded, 11 minus 11, we have 11 standard ones that have been upgraded. Okay. And they're all in all the 6 geopolitical zones. And that's where we're having the pilot studies, where we're doing pilot studies there. And that's actually basically Ministry of Health that is basically doing that. In terms of the NDLA facilities, we have 36 across the country, and we have one in the headquarters in Lagos, in Shore Road headquarters. And we've just upgraded, we've just done capacity building, so we have 251 newly trained counselors. We have 170 million Nigerians. It's not enough, but it's first a step in the right direction. But the important thing we're trying to do now is community-based treatment, which is what we're trying to do. So we're now, which is part of the master plan, is to get the communities and agencies of government and NGOs involved. Like we have, like Godale we work with.
All right, thank you very much, Mrs. Bode George. Let's go back again to our Port Harcourt guest, that's Dr. Williams Ebiti. Dr. Ebiti, 2 points. I would like you to first comment on the aspects of the master plan in action, as it were, as described by the NDLEA Director General, plus what you do know with regard to the operationalization of the master plan. Are we on the right course?
To a great extent, I would say that the master plan is a good document, but it can be really improved upon. You know, that is one. Secondly, are we really following the master plan as strictly as those of us who contributed to the master plan feel? The answer is a no, we're not really following it as strictly as we would want to. There is a whole lot that is supposed to be done in the master plan. In fact, maybe I should just mention one thing very quickly here, that drug demand reduction is actually specifically anchored by the Ministry of Health because it is a health issue. Drug supply reduction is anchored primarily by the NDLEA because it is a law enforcement issue. And I don't think that until recently, you know, the Ministry of Health has not been adequately involved in in dealing with the issue. But now a lot has happened in the Federal Ministry of Health. They have set up the Drug Demand Reduction Unit in the Federal Ministry of Health that is really doing a whole lot. The drug demand reduction policy is being developed by the Ministry of Health, and it will soon be out. The controlled medicine and narcotics policy has also been developed, and it's actually out. It has been launched in the country. So there's a whole lot that is happening in that side. And I want to say very clearly that each time we talk about drug demand reduction, that we should always remember that the Ministry of Health is actually supposed to take the lead because it's a health issue. Now, when it comes to the part that is being supposed to be carried out by the CSOs, not much is happening in that aspect from the point of the master plan. There's a whole lot that the civil society organizations are doing within the communities, which is really very great. But they're not doing it as a subset of what is supposed to be happening in terms of, has it been budgeted for in the master plan, and are they giving that budget to the civil society organizations to carry out this job within that setting? You know, that's also something else. And I want to say that even though there is a whole lot going on in terms of treatment in the country and all that, how much of it is actually evidence-based? Beyond the 11 treatment centers and all that, I think that when it comes to the issue of treatment, experts should be allowed to look at what are the evidences that is involved. And that is why when I was talking about the issue of what is happening in Kaduna now concerning women, the idea is not just to go in and treat them. The idea is, first of all, to gather the necessary requisite evidence as to how many of them are using drugs, what kind of drugs are they using, what are some of the factors that is making it difficult for them to be able to access treatment, what are the problems that are associated with them, and then we now develop a plan of, a treatment plan for them as a group and as individuals, and then we can now scale it up. The idea about this is that we don't just want to do things just because there is an opportunity to do things, but the idea is that it must be evidence-based. So the master plan, it's good, but the master plan can be improved on. The activities in the master plan can be improved on, and the agencies that are supposed to be handling specific parts in the master plan should take that up. I would want to say that the NDLEA is doing very well in terms of, drug supply reduction, and the Ministry of Health is beginning to, come up to the position and take that leadership role in terms of drug demand reduction, which is actually supposed to be the case, and every other agency is supposed to be supporting them in this.
Dr. Ibiti, just before we bring in Ogbona Ike from Kaduna again, one point, are we responding rather too late to the drug demand issue from what has been indicated and from what we do know? Are we responding rather too late? And then from, again, what we've also heard with regard to only some 11 treatment centers, are we treating drug demand the same way that perhaps we also treat psychiatric cases? And you can see what happens in different parts of the country. Persons who have mental problems, are either chained down or the devil is whipped out of them. Do we have a systematic approach to all of these issues that would appear to be a national malaise?
Okay, the answer is a yes in terms of the fact that the protocol for handling such issues is well established. Presently now, 11 treatment centers have been upgraded. Now, the point is, let's get this clear. It does not mean that drug treatment is only carried out in 11 treatment centers in the country. No. Every teaching hospital in this country have the expertise to deal with issues of drug treatment. Now, whether that expertise, that is adequately, put in place and put to use, that I cannot say. However, through the United Nations Office of Drugs on Crime, 11 treatment centers in the country have been upgraded, and we look at them as model treatment centers, and they are also training hubs. Now, what is supposed to happen is that they are supposed to scale this treatment to other people. Now, the idea of, bringing this up is that, very little amount of money was used to train people in terms of screening, assessment, brief intervention, psychological intervention, and drug treatment. Now, that model could be used within the community, and I understand that by next year, CSOs will also be trained in this same package, and that is to scale up. And within a period of 6 months, the UNODC were able to train over 1,000 professionals in this kind of package. And by next year, possibly they will be getting up to 3,000 professionals, that's if they continue at the state that they're going. The idea is to widen the scope of those who have the requisite expertise and skills to deal with people with drug problems. Are we responding? Well, the truth is that we are responding late. Now, responding late does not mean that we do not have the hope of, covering the ground that is supposed to be covered. I think if we do the right thing, even from this moment on, we would be able to do what is needful in terms of drug demand reduction. The United States, for example, are declaring an epidemic for, that's for opioid. And they seem to have been doing a whole lot, but most of what they've been doing has been wrong anyway. They've been responding for a long time, but that the response has not been the right kind of response. So I'm hoping that now that we've decided to see this as a problem, the National Assembly is talking about it, the northern governors are talking about it, and there are experts that are ready to be of help. If we take away politics, I think that a whole lot could be done even at this point.
Thank you very much. Ogbona Ike from our Kaduna Network Studios. Let's also get your thoughts on this with regard to the strategies that we do have outlined in the master plan. What is working and what isn't working from your point of view with regard to the operationalization of the plan?
I think the master plan, the drug control master plan, it's a 5-year document. This version of it should run us up until 2019. And one of the areas that I would like to see a lot of improvement on is the area that has to do with state and local government. It's a national plan, but there is a need for state governments and local governments on the community level for there to be some kind of corresponding element. These 11 centers we keep talking about are federal government centers, and for a state like Kaduna, for example, there is one of such center, but it caters to about an 8-state catchment area. So when you imagine one center catering to a catchment area of 8 states, and what that translates to in terms of numbers, you see that this still brings us back to issues of accessibility. It is just not enough. Kaduna State has actually taken such an initiative, and it's something that I'm very proud of, actually having been a part of that process, where the state took the initiative to develop a system that looks at issues of prevention, treatment, rehabilitation of people who use drugs, and has created an agency of the state government to make sure that these kinds of issues are addressed in the most effective manner possible. And what it does really is to bring together, like Dr. Ibiti mentioned, there are private centers that manage addiction, there are CSOs, there are NGOs, there's a lot of things going on in many different places. There is a need to make sure, first of all, that all of these things that are going on in an evidence-based manner. What is being done? Is it done, like you said, are we simply chaining people and beating the hell out of them like we've done with mental illness in the past? Because we know that that doesn't work. We know that only increases stigma, and it makes people who have these problems stay away from going for treatment. So there needs to be a mechanism to make sure that those that are offering treatment, no matter what threshold, whether it is the admission in a psychiatric hospital or the counseling service, that they are doing this according to some laid down minimum standard where the rights, the needs and all those other considerations of the person being taken care of are significantly met. But one thing I'm actually very happy about in terms of the drug control master plan is this national survey that has just been completed. Again, I happen to be a part of that here in the Northwest. And so this, for the first time in a very long time, will give us a clearer and more detailed picture of what exactly are we dealing with in the different states when it comes to drug use, the types of drug use, and the problems that it generates that need to be managed going forward. So the Drug Control Master Plan is a good document, but like Dr. Ibiti said, there's a lot of room for improvement.
Thank you very much, Ike Ogbonna. Let's take some of our tweets now. The next one is from Jediola Justice. He says, who are the people using drugs? Are they not people who are well-to-do and carefully induced, less privileged, who don't have the modality too?
Sonny Michael Omakoji has this tweet. Frustration, lack of parental control, and poor government regulations are all factors contributing to this menace, and it should be looked into.
The next one is from Jibrila N. Ina. He says, when some of the law enforcement officials are addicted to, how do you expect it to reduce?
Okay, Udo tweets, great topic indeed. Now, most of these drugs have been supplied by politicians who use this youth for thuggery, and we also have the problem of poor upbringing.
Nuruddin Gida tweets, more public enlightenment and rehabilitation remains important. And then we also have this from Adeni Moronfolo. It says, punitive laws should be achieved and embrace the support, don't punish approach. And if it Izu Obano tweets, the potent solution rests with God. Religion is therefore fundamental. All right, those are the set of tweets that we have for the second point. Just before we bring in the NDLEA DG again, let's, Dr. Ibiti Williams via Skype from Port Harcourt. The issue with regard to the effective role of the subnational governments is one I would like you to speak to. How much consciousness do we have at the state and local government levels with regard to the acute awareness, as it were, of this being a problem, rather than say, okay, there's an NDLEA, that's a federal problem, and so states and local governments are concerned with chasing infrastructure and the so-called dividends of democracy? Do we recognize this at the state level, or do state governments recognize this as a major social problem that has to be tackled effectively?
I would say that for the great number of states that I've been to and spoken with their government, the answer is an absolute no. And most of them do not recognize it as a problem. that should be put into the state as part of its mandate, for the state or even the local government areas. Incidentally, in Kaduna State, it was one of the things that the government talked about within the first 3 months of coming into office to come out with the law. And, Kaduna State government finally came up with a drug bill, which in my own opinion, it's better than the national drug bill, in terms of its approach to drug, and even established a bureau for substance use, within the state. We hope that the state will take it a lot further and give that agency all the necessary support to be able to do the needful. So, but the point generally is that most states do not quite recognize that as a problem. In fact, most states will simply say that since NDLEA exists, and then they should deal with that problem. But we know that, NDLEA could do this much. It is a collective responsibility of all government, both state, and local government, to be able to come in and partner with NDLEA, for example, that dealing with the issues that are within the state. And of course, the state ministries of health are supposed to actually be championing the issues of drug demand reduction. That's very important. And so, I have visited a lot of primary healthcare centers, and I've asked people working within the primary healthcare centers whether they have any knowledge at all of how to engage people with drug use problem. And the answer is no, they don't have even the training, to be able to do that. So we believe that if the states, take it as being important, something that they could deliver on, maybe the problem would be a lot easier to manage and deal with, instead of just leaving it to the schools and leaving it to possibly NDLEA.
All right, Dr. Ibiti, thank you very much. We have another set of tweets. We'd like to take those tweets down before we get the closing thoughts of our guests. Lamidi Sahid Ademola tweets. He says, we need to look into the kind of national orientation that we have in order to build strong values in our society. We have lost our values. Family institution, like other institutions, has failed in the country.
Wolfgang tweets, in my opinion, I think it would be easier to regulate the supply since you can't efficiently police people's habits.
Dan Gata, good morning. I think the government should also introduce drugs subject to our schools. By doing that, that will reduce the problem.
And the certified gentleman tweets, it could be reduced to the barest minimum or totally eradicated if all our law enforcement agencies are seriously committed to it.
Lanre tweets, the rate at which young persons are engaging in drugs is becoming alarming in Idiroko and Ogun State generally. Now let's go to Lagos. Mr. Winston Igodalo, let's get your thoughts. There's been a tendency for us, for you guests, as it were, to narrow the problem down to youth groups, young persons, and so on and so forth. But there are also concerns, as we know, about persons who are not exactly young, professional or occupational users of hard drugs, some truckers, for instance. How much do we know about these groups, and is it possible to target them also in terms of the messaging?
Yeah, you are very correct, sir. We noticed that even the park where you see a lot of Agbero people and the rest of them, you see a situation where they will be selling all different kind of drug at the park. Are you getting my point? So that is what we're actually also saying, that if the government can also come in from through that means to actually see if we can be able to stop it, because most of those drivers, they're always high. They always want to take some substance before they drive. And we see all those factory workers, they also want to, get themselves high before they go to factory. And they don't know there's also hazard in all those things they are doing. So there are so many situations where we have to bring government in, because we cannot, as an NGO, we cannot really go to park, for example, and tell those people who are selling different kind of drug, different kind of alcohol to stop. And you still see these things actually still cause a lot of auto accident on the road, because a lot of drivers, they want to take so many substances before they enter the road. So we are so concerned. So that's what we are looking at a situation where we can be able to, bring government in, they can be able to stop all those situations where they go to park and stop all those substances being sold at the park. We are talking about even drug in workplaces. There are so many situations because, like, for example, now we are into, let's just say, we are still facing recession and the rest of them. But sincerely, because of situation people are facing at work. They want to, they want to relieve of their, the situation what they are facing, their financial constraint. They're actually getting themselves in substance abuse. So these are the things we are still talking about. We are still trying to educate them to see how they can be able to just stop all these things, to think otherwise, to engage their mind for other things. Because it's not just drug, it's not just alcohol that can be able to stop their situation. So that's why we are looking at the situation where government can come, especially the park, because it becomes very common. If you go to the park in Nigeria, you see where they sell substance, different kind of drug. But you, as an NGO, we cannot really go to park. The only thing we can do is to educate them, not to take all those stuff. But the only way those kind of things can be stopped at the park and some other instances where they sell all those things openly is where government can be able to come in. Even NDLE, if they even go to that place, NDLE can even stop all those. The next day they are back. But if government can be able to implement a situation where they go to all these people and say, look, we don't want this thing to be sold here, and it can be stopped. So,
all right. Thank you very, very much, Wilson Ighodalo, President, Drug Salvation Foundation. He joined us from our Lagos Network Center. We thank you very much for joining us this morning on the program. Okay, just to also state that I think we're out of recession.
Yes, technically we're out of recession. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But just to get the closing thoughts of Dr. William Sebiti. Dr. William Sebiti, now, one of the points that, again, we take away from this conversation has to do with the strategies and what has been wrong with our sensitization and so on and so forth. From your experience in dealing with these issues, and now with particular regard to drug demand reduction, how much of Nigerian professionals are engaged in all of this? I mean, the NDLEA DJ is here. She might speak to you, but how many of them? I'm asking, for instance, sensitization. If there is a problem with messaging, how many communication experts are we getting in? How many psychologists are we getting in? Are persons doing studies, doctorate degrees, or master's programs, being pursued, or master's, if you like, thesis being pursued with regard to specific aspects of drug demand reduction, and therefore getting more ideas as to how we can more effectively deal with these issues?
I would want to say that that may not be the best way to go about it. Professionals like psychiatrists, for example, if I should use that, or psychologists that have been trained, deploying their time to carrying out sensitization is a complete waste, a humongous waste of their, expertise in doing that. I believe that people could be trained. There could be peer-to-peer kind of communication and sensitization, advocacy, and all that. All right. So, for example, in school, peers, students will listen to students a lot more than they would listen to maybe a doctor speak to them or something of that nature. So, people are supposed to be trained across board to be able to carry out those kind of simple, goal-directed and targeted kind of intervention. If it is about sensitization, can you train the people within the community to carry out the sensitization? If it is in school, can you train fellow students to be able to carry out that kind of intervention? If it is at workplaces, can you train people within the workplaces? If it is the women folk, can you train the women to be able to carry out such kind of intervention? Now, doing that would have a greater impact than getting experts like psychologists or psychiatrists to come and be carrying out intervention and all that. They should be there to carry out maybe the treatment for those who would actually require treatment. In doing that, we would be deploying our resources a lot better, than getting these experts to just come and carry out sensitization. So people should be trained for the messaging. And in fact, some of the experts may not even understand how to adequately carry out this sensitization. They too may need training in that particular aspect to be able to do that.
Thank you very much, Dr. William Sebiti. He joined us from Port Harcourt Network Center, Community Intervention Network on Drugs. It's a pleasure talking with you this morning.
And good morning, viewers.
All right, we'd also love to say a very big thank you to our guest who joined us from our Kaduna Network Center, Joseph Ogbonna IK. He is of the Milestone Rehabilitation Foundation there in Kaduna. We thank you for your thoughts and time this morning.
Thank you very much.
Finally, I'd like to ask the DG of the NDLEA, if someone is into drugs, someone might be watching, they know someone who's into drugs and they need help. They want to be rehabilitated. Where can they go? Where can they get up drugs?
First of all, once you want, you can walk into any NDLA center, anyone across the country, and they're all on the website. And ideally, if you want to get treatment and care, you should walk into any hospital, because that's what general hospitals are for. And let me just quickly correct something, which I think we need to understand. Anything that is supposed to be deal with drug demand reduction should be done by professionals. While I agree that CSOs like Dr. Bitu and Co., the law is specific. NDLA is in charge of counseling. Ministry of Health is in charge of treatment and care. That's what the law says, and as it is, that's how it stands. And truth of the matter is that anybody can walk into a center. You can go online. You can go through Twitter. We have a Twitter handle. If you need help on anything specific, we have online counseling. But I want us to understand that resources.
Are there telephone numbers? It's not everybody that has access to online.
It's NDLA. It's actually on the website. You go on there. It's NDLA 0000 to the end, but for 11 numbers. But you can actually go through Twitter. You can go through. We have a drug and management center.
What's the Twitter handle?
NDLA. It's just you just put NDLA. You actually will come up. And then we have DG_NDLA as well, where we deal with drug issues as well. Okay. So you can go there if you need help. And one thing I want to add is that resources. I think we need corporate social responsibility. We need more people involved. But in terms of professionals, even for people who are in NGOs, we train them. Yeah. And that's what the UNODC also is trying to do. You must train people. You just can't have anybody in